All right, guys. So I want to go ahead and I want to talk about Oklahoma football and a little bit about what we saw this past weekend. So I have had some time to sleep on it. So have you guys. And I just kind of want to break down three key players that I saw on the defense that I think we should be excited about going into the season, but also three players on the offense that I think just shined and showed us that this team is going to be able to put up just the kind of production that they've been able to put up maybe over the past 3 or 4 years. So going into it, the first player I have to talk about is, in my terms, I think probably one of the best players on this defense, Billy Bowman. So one thing that I really noticed is he stood out from a lot of the other players on that defense just athletically. We saw him in the third quarter try to make that one-handed grab like he did in the practice or the scrimmage. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Kris, but I remember he made that interception and he tried to do it again in the third quarter. And
Yeah.
when you see him do that, you see just the athleticism that Billy Bowman has. And when we think back to when he was recruited and just the hype around him, around his athleticism and what he could have possibly have brought to the table with his speed, we kind of got to see a little bit of a glimpse about that with Billy Bowman this week. And it also looked like he was able to adjust quickly to the coverages that needed to be made. What do you think about it, Kris?
No, I think Billy Bowman had a great day. Definitely, it was kind of quiet for Key, so I'm waiting for him to pop out. But hell, it's just the first game of the season. But with Billy Bowman, here's an analogy for you, PG. In basketball, when you have a really athletic team, a really athletic team that can go out there and just run the floor like no other and score a lot of points in transition, right? So you want to add organization, you want to add structure to it, but you also don't want to put a lot of limitations on those athletes because you don't want to put them in this box. So going back to Billy Bowman, that's what you're seeing him do or be allowed to do in this defense because now he's able to just act off of sheer instinct. He's able to just show his athleticism, just be all around the ball. We saw glimpses of this last year. First game of the season, I was there, watched him against Tulane, and I saw it. He was all over the field. He was making plays. He was doing this. He was doing that. But it kind of just tapered off during the season last year for obvious reasons. However, going back to now, you look at him during that game, man. It was great to see him tackling. It was great to see him have hands on the ball and just kind of be able to direct the defense and be there in those positions or whatnot. Because usually, on those type of plays right there that you saw him where he was getting those tackles or where he was, it was really 50-50 balls at that time because when he's throwing it, he's throwing it in traffic. Billy Bowman's right there, so you're hoping that he can kind of finish as far as getting some breakups soon as well. But yeah, I mean, I thought he did pretty well.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out that I think a lot of people forget is he was a three-sport athlete. He played basketball, he played
Mhm.
football, and he played track in high school. So we know he's got the speed. We've talked about it before. Like, this man not only needs to be returning kicks, he needs to be returning punts as well. But with playing basketball, he is trained and he has learned how to have that type of vertical. So I believe we should expect to see things from him in that secondary. Like, I feel like kind of like what we saw from CeeDee Lamb when he was here in terms of being able to have the jumps and the hops to be able to go up there and grab the ball. But instead of having it
Mhm.
on the offense, you're going to have it on the defensive side, which I think is just special to have, especially when you have an athlete on the defense that has played basketball and then they're in the secondary. So,
I think he's going to be more physical at the point of attack as well. So when you see him probably lined up against a guy like Quentin Johnson down there at TCU, you're going to see him be more physical and try to play the ball an awful lot this year for sure. Another thing to talk about with Billy Bowman is that hey, on the kickoff returns, I mean, hey, he looked pretty electric back there. So. I think there was one where I thought he was going to pop it, but they caught up with him. But I will say, special teams, I'm pretty excited about that. But seeing him with the ball, everybody says it. I haven't seen that much of it. I saw some, I saw it a lot in high school, but I was like, well, maybe he's just not that guy at this level. But looking at him, returning the kickoffs, I was like, hey man, he looks twitchy out there. He looks like and he looks like he got some speed. So I'm excited to see. I think he's going to get a touchdown this year off a kickoff return.
Oh, he definitely might. He might even get a touchdown on the defensive side of the ball too. He's
Yeah.
definitely under the Venables defense with Schmitty because this summer he definitely put on a lot of muscle. He definitely has the potential, if he continues to grow at the rate that we feel like he can grow, to go be, I think, a first or second rounder, in my opinion. He has that kind of potential. Just
Yeah.
a matter of, can he put it all together?
Yeah.
So the next player I want to get into, and this one is an as advertised player, Reggie Grimes. We had heard a lot about him. There was a lot of excitement from these coaches and from just a lot of the people that were there at the scrimmages and at these practices. I got to see him, but we got to see it in full action. Now, again, it is UTEP, so you kind of have to take that into consideration. Maybe their offensive line isn't as great as like an Oklahoma State or a West Virginia or even a Baylor going into conference play, but he still had 2.5 sacks, a forced fumble, and 3 tackles, which from a guy on the defensive line, like, that's really good production for one game. And I think if Reggie Grimes can go out there, and he doesn't have to get 2.5 sacks a game, but even if he can get half a sack or 1 sack a game and go out there and get you 3 or 5 tackles, like, you've got yourself potentially a first round guy right there. What'd you think of Reggie Grimes? Because I'm not going to lie, in the stadium where I was sitting, a lot of people were talking about him.
No, man, I've been bullish on Reggie Grimes. I mean, since he got on campus, that everybody can see it. It's on record. I've said it plenty of times. A lot of people, everybody loves Ethan Downs. No problems with that. But on the other hand, I think that Reggie Grimes is going to shine this season because I think one of the things that here's the thing with Venables and Roof and all of them. They're used to having these athletes, these freak athletes or these speedy athletes, these quick twitchy guys, right? They're used to putting them in positions where they can truly excel. So with a guy like Grimes, with a guy like Stripling, with a guy like Ethan Downs, one of the things that you want to see them do this year is finish. Outside of Jalen Redmond, how many of our defensive linemen last year really finished whenever they got home? Well, Isaiah Thomas, obviously, and Benito. You can go with those two. However, when you look at this year or whatnot, you're just wanting them to be able to say, hey, if you get home, finish, tackle, sacks. We need all of that. But Reggie Grimes, I think he has a really high ceiling. I think that I would say that he has first round written all over him if he can put it all together. However, it's kind of up to him how he wants to capitalize on his potential. But I think that with Todd Bates, with Chavez, all of them out there, I mean, I think the sky's the limit for a guy like him, a guy like Ethan Downs as well. But Reggie Grimes definitely shined this game. He has something to prove, and I think he has a chip on his shoulder as well. He came in with a lot of hype, and I think that this defense fits him really well as well.
Yeah, so you actually mentioned Ethan Downs a lot there. And I thought this was an interesting statistic when I actually went back and I looked at it and I look at what Ethan Downs and Reggie Grimes' production was. So last year, Reggie Grimes only had 2 sacks. In this game, he had 2.5 sacks. And again, I know people are going to point out it's UTEP. Well, we played Tulane last year. And we played a Western Carolina team. So I would have felt like between those 2 games, you should have at least been able to get 2.5 sacks, right? Especially if you've got that talent. Additionally, Ethan Downs last year only had a half a sack recorded technically on the stats. This game, he already got 1. Both of those players are already exceeding what they did last year in that statistical category. And if they keep up what they did, in this game in terms of tackles, they're going to beat what they did last year in terms of a total tackle statistic. So both of those guys are going to be shining spots on the Sooner defense. But really, for Reggie Grimes, and I mean, you can say this for any of those defensive linemen, one thing you saw, which I think is an improvement from the teams that we've had the previous years, is they were applying a lot of pressure there. And when the quarterback left the pocket, they all started running towards the quarterback. And you
Hmm.
especially saw that with Reggie Grimes. He was chasing him all over the field. He might have not gotten to him every time, but he was chasing him all over the field, applying a lot of pressure. And that's something that, when we go into the Big 12 play and you've got the quarterbacks that are going to be able to sling the ball everywhere, like JT Daniels and Spencer Sanders and, even maybe Blake Shapen out Baylor, that's something that we really are going to need from that defensive line. Guys that can go in there, apply that pressure, and chase the quarterback down.
No, I think it's really key that this front seven. I mean, I think the linebacker play and the defensive line, they have to be better than what they were last year. Not to say that we didn't have the production, but it didn't pass the eye test. So you want this defense, at least this front seven, to do both, pass the eye test and have the production. I think one of the things getting into Big 12 play, I think that it's going to be more concise. I think a lot of those, some of the players that you named, Spencer Sanders, always a wild card, will always be a wild card. He's going to try to hurt you with his feet, especially this year. They don't really have a run game. When you look at K-State, can you stop the threat of the run that is Deuce Vaughn and Adrian Martinez? Because they're going to do a lot of gadgety type plays, right? Then you even look at a Baylor with Shapen. Now, supposedly Shapen is supposed to have that vertical game down that they want. However, we watched him against OSU, and granted, it was a small sample size. Uh, it wasn't all that vertical. It was really intermediate, a lot of intermediate routes, right? But at the same time, you just want to be able to contain, get a lot of hurries, get a lot of sacks if you can, but you just want to finish. You want to tackle. You want to let those opposing those offensive coordinators know, like, hey, look, it's going to be a test for you. If you want to beat us, you're going to have to try us out in the secondary, and that may not work for you as well.
Yeah, I will say this. I do think a lot of the Big 12 coaches and even some of the teams that we're going to have to go play later in the season looked at this defensive line this past weekend and go, yeah, we're going to have to game plan our running game around that defensive line because it's not
Yeah,
going to be as easy as it's been in the past couple of years.
yeah, no, exactly. I agree with that.
Yeah, so the third player I had on this list, and man, I went back and forth on, hey, who's this going to be this third guy, right? And it's Danny Stutsman. And it's because we saw so much from him last year before he got hurt. I think there were these
Hmm.
expectations like Danny Stutzman's going to be a star. And coming out of high school, again, this is where I say it all the time. High stars don't mean everything. He was a 3-star guy coming out of high school is what I think he was.
Yeah,
He was, and now he was recruited by a lot of SEC schools. Everybody wanted him. But again, stars don't mean everything, and it proves it here. Danny Stutzman last year, high production before he got hurt. This year, in this game, he had 9 total tackles. 6 of those were his own. And, he talked about, if you guys went back and watched the interview that I had with Danny Stutzman, he specifically talked about how he wants to be a leader on this defense, and he wants to be a leader in that linebacker room. And I think that's going to be especially important now, more than ever, with TD Roof being out. And we saw it this weekend. Danny was making plays. He was flying all over the place. He did drop an interception, but you know what? At least he just got his hands up there and knocked it down. The hands will come with it eventually. What'd you think of Danny Stutzman?
Danny Stutsman had one of the plays of the games, in my opinion, with that tackle that he had on the was it a running back? I think, yeah. Regardless, it was a great open field tackle. Danny Stutsman, like I said, this defense. I mean, if you go back and watch that play, that interception, it's two things that you saw there. One, you saw him drop the interception, but the second thing was that, oh, well, this is what Venables is saying. If you buy in, if you actually understand the full, like what I'm trying to get you to do on defense, I will put you in position to make a play on the ball every single time. And that's what you saw with a play like that. Now, as great as Danny Stutzman was, I would counter you and say, hey, Aguebu had a hell of a game as well. Aguebu looked really good out there. He was flying around the ball. He looks motivated this year. I don't know. I'm not saying that he wasn't motivated last year, but he looks motivated this year. And I really feel comfortable with both of those guys out there on the field as much as they were. So Danny Stutsman had a heck of a day, but I would also say, hey, Aguebu was around the ball an awful lot. Richie would have got that one tackle, but I mean, he didn't really have a good angle at that kid. But at the same time, I thought Aguebu played lights out as well.
Yeah, no, and the other two players I was really going back and forth with in that spot for Danny Stutsman was Aguebu or Deshaun White, right? We got to see
Mm-hmm.
Deshaun White in that cheetah role. You know, he looked really good. But yes, David Aguebu had himself a game. He had 7 total tackles. He had 1 sack, 1 tackle for loss. Like, David Aguebu was making a lot of plays, and he was all over the place as well, causing the disruption.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, let's be honest. If, those 3 or 4 or 5 guys are your constants on the defense this year, and they're out there making plays and they're doing what you need them to do, like, you got a hell of a defense this year. You've got a hell of a team,
Mm-hmm.
especially for the turnaround from what we've had last year and the previous year. And that's saying a lot because I did feel like at some times last year, the OU defense was pretty good. At some times. It was not
Mm-hmm.
consistently, though. Now, it was more
Well,
so, it was really good on the defensive line with Perrion Winfrey, Isaiah Thomas, Ethan Downs, and those guys. But that's saying a lot. This defense has really turned around this year, at least what we've seen so far. And I think especially as we get into Big 12 play, and I keep saying Big 12 play, and I know we got Nebraska and I know we got Kent State coming up, but I don't think we should expect to see a super complicated game scheme for either of those two teams. OU should be able to go in
yeah,
there and handle their business pretty
we.
easily on the both of those.
I would say one thing to keep in mind with this team. I said it on our podcast the other day, but one of the things that you have to take away from this game, in my opinion, is the fact that, or just 2 key points that I think a lot of people kind of are overlooking. One, Dana Dimel is a Bill Snyder disciple. So he comes from that coaching tree. So what you saw him do was, in my opinion, it's almost like he abandoned what he really wanted to do, and he said, "All right, I'm just going to try to chip away at this defense. I'm going to work the field," which is a great segue into point number 2, which is OU. Even though we did give up quite a few passing yards or and whatnot, one of the things that I'm pleased to say about this defense is that they took away a few of the things that that UTEP wants to do. UTEP wants to go vertical. They want to get you matched up with their wide receivers because they think their wide receivers are pretty good too, and so they love to go vertical. That quarterback is a really good quarterback. Can't take that away from him. He made some damn good throws that game. I mean, it's not like the defense was that bad off. He just made some great throws. But when you take that away, and then as you can see, the bubble screens, the little quick passes, different things like that, the little jailbreak screens, I saw it a couple of times. That's what they like to do. I tried to break down as much film as I could on them, and I even talked to Adrian Broadus, who's a reporter for them, and he even said the same thing. Yeah, we like to be physical, but we like to be finesse as well. And so they were more physical that game because they had to be, because the caliber athlete that OU was bringing. So again, just to kind of end that point, I just think it's key just to know that, you change their game plan. You forced them to run something that they weren't really necessarily wanting to do. You forced them to work the field to earn those touchdowns, those field goals, and all the points that they earned. So with that being said, I think overall, I think this defense played pretty damn well.
Yeah, and I'm going to go back to the point that I've said all year with OU and
Mm-hmm.
expectations. If there's one thing OU fans should be happy about, if there's only one thing that can change this year on the defense, it's, can the defense go out there and make a tackle, make a good tackle, and bring them down? Not after they've gotten purpose yards, after they've caught the ball. One thing I noticed was the quarterback would throw the ball, they would get it, they would get maybe a yard. Sometimes they wouldn't get that, and they would have 2 or 3 OU guys already on them. And that's something that OU has tremendously missed in years past. And that is something that has cost us so many games and so many opportunities, is just being able to go out there and make the tackles. And if you're going to give up a pass, be there to take the guy down right away. And that's something that I noticed that they did all game on Saturday. And I think that if they continue to take that and they continue to work on that all throughout the season, I mean, Oklahoma is going to be a pretty dang good team on the defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, so I want to go ahead and I want to talk about the three guys on the offense that I was just super impressed with. Of course, the first one we got to talk about is Dillon Gabriel. And I know a lot of other people might have not been as impressed with Dillon. I know they might have wanted to see over 300 yards, maybe a couple more touchdowns. But here's the reason why. People got to remember that this man's coming off an injury. He's coming off a season where he only played 3 games. And the other thing is, this man's got a little bit of PTSD out there because at UCF, he was sacked 50 times. Now, mind you, he only played 3 games last year, and he was still sacked 50 times in 3 years. And so it was nice to be able to see Dillon Gabriel and kind of see what we should expect out of him. And I know as the season goes, he's going to grow and he's going to progress. But it still looked like he knew how to be able to go out there and read coverages and be able to make a pass. Additionally, he completed 65% of his passes. That's over his career average on a completion percentage. And with the talent that we're going to surround Dillon Gabriel with at the wide receiver position, and then not only that in the backfield, and then people protecting him, I talked about how he's going to be a potential Heisman candidate this year because he's just going to look really good in this offense from what he had at UCF. And we're going to be able to point to all those statistics. What do you think about Dillon Gabriel's game against UTEP?
First quarter was lights out. Rest of the game was still a decent faring out there. I was pleased. I was happy with it. He's accurate. He throws a great ball. Sometimes he tries to fit some balls into some tight windows. I can see that, but I think that he's going to definitely have way more touchdowns than interceptions. I think this may be a year where he could potentially have a really, really low amount of, or really small amount of interceptions. One of the things that I would say about some of the naysayers out there, the doubters of Dillon Gabriel, I think one of the things you have to look at is the offensive line. We're shuffling guys in different positions right now. I mean, we have Anton Harrison playing at right tackle where Wanye Morris would be, and then we're Tyler Guyton, and then we're trying to get other guys, and then I think Teddy or excuse me, at the left tackle, but then we have like Teddy and Eichert we're talking about today. I'm not sure if Matuar is fully healthy right now, but the offensive line, they did not struggle, but at the same time, they didn't have the greatest game as a unit out there. And I think that's fine because it's the first game of the season. And like we even said kind of off camera, hey, a lot of the stuff that we're complaining about is great because it's going on film and it's going to be corrected. And I think we all have that faith in this coaching staff right here that we're going to make those adjustments and actually get guys out there who are going to do their jobs. So with that being said, I think that when we do get started in Big 12 play, but first game, I think, Nebraska, we got to go up there, firing on all cylinders. I think you're going to see a little bit more wrinkles to the fold, and we're not going to be so vanilla. And I think you'll have more options. Definitely wanting to see, it was great to see Brayden Willis and see Marvin Mills be featured so heavily. And it was great. Hell, I mean, it was great to see Eric Gray get over 100 yards rushing in a game in an OU uniform. That's great. But definitely can't wait for guys like Theo Weiss, Jalil Farouk, Jaden Gibson, guys like that. Can't wait to see them get more involved in this offense as well and just see what Levy really has in store for us throughout this season. So, but for Dillon Gabriel, man, I give him probably a B minus. Maybe I'm being a little bit overly critical, but I give him a B minus, and I think he probably would say that was fair, simply because he probably expected to have a way bigger game than that. But at the same time, you got to take what the defense is giving you. You got to be able to to do what you need to do, and you can just run the ball. So it was there. So why go away from that? At the end of the day, it's a win. It's the first win on his belt, and I think he's going to go crazy against Kent State, to say the least.
Yeah, no, he's going to have a really big game and he's going to have a really big year. Like I said, 2019 and 2020, he had stellar years. He threw a total of 11 interceptions, but went for, I think it was 30 or 63 touchdowns. I mean, that's pretty good. And again, in this Oklahoma offense, with all the talent he's going to have around him, he's going to succeed. He's going to be a player to watch, and he's only going to get better throughout the season. Remember, he's coming off an injury. He's going to be a little
Yeah.
rusty. He might be practicing. He might be doing all these things. Practicing against your own defense is not the same against going into a game and playing somebody else that is out there to take you out. And I was a little bit impressed. I'd agree with you. B- on that performance, but I think we should see a lot better Dillon Gabriel in Kent State and Nebraska, and then going into the Big 12, I think he'll be probably in full swing. So
Yeah, I mean, and the thing about it is that when he's on, he's on. That hell, the first play of the game would have been a touchdown if we would have got the proper blocking. But that I think the third player, so whenever he caught Mims on that was a dime right there. I was like, hey, that's an NFL throw because you threw him. Not only did you throw him open, but you threw it in a place where only he can catch it. I mean, he threw a dime to Mims, and I was like, hey, he's playing like that, we're going to be awfully dangerous this year because if the pass game is going like that, it's going to be hard to stop. But I think, some things we've heard from some Texas fans and from other people is just, hey, can you guys play complementary football with that fast of a offense? And then also, are you guys going to be pass happy or what? But you saw the balance and you saw them make the adjustment, which is really, really encouraging, going forward in this season. But I think that he's going to have a hell of a year. Not so. I'm not going to put him in the Heisman race just yet. But I think that if he continues at this pace and he does what he needs to do, I think he'll definitely be in New York at the end of this season.
yeah, the Heisman race for quarterbacks is going to be tremendously difficult this year because you got a lot of quarterbacks throughout college football this year that are NFL talents that are going to compete for a spot in New York. And so for Dillon Gabriel to go in there and compete this year, he's going to have to play really well every single game. I do want to make a point to your offense playing really fast because I actually thought that was a negative towards the team because I thought that was a negative towards what Lincoln Riley did here at Oklahoma for as long as he did. Because the faster you play, the shorter possession time that you have, the longer your defense has to be out there. And we know that those defensive guys can get tired really quickly, especially on the defensive line. I do think, though, that you're going to see Lebby in the next two games really put a lot of pressure on that running back room and really see what every single one of those guys are made of. Because if we can establish a solid running game and have two or three backs that we know at any point, any given time can go get us 100 yards, when we go into Big 12 play and we maybe need to control the ball and we need to control the clock, that's going to be a major favor in our advantage. That's something that I don't feel like have been able to do since Joe Mixon and P. Ryan have left. And then at that same time, Joe Mixon and P. Ryan were explosive. They weren't the type of guys that were going to go get you 5 yards, you go reset. Like they were the kind of guys that, okay, we're going to go get 10, 15, 20 yards at a time. So they still made that offense really explosive. Going into the transition with the running room, Eric Gray was tremendous, but I had a hard time just giving it to one running back because that whole room played really well. So for my second offensive player, I'm just giving it to the whole running back room because we got to see Eric Gray show us that he can be a first, second, and third down running back, or first, second, and third down, running back. But then also we saw Marcus Major and Gavin Freeman just ball out. Additionally, you saw Jovante Barnes, get 4 carries for 25 yards. And unfortunately, one of his touchdowns was called back due to, I think it was a holding call. But Jovante Barnes has got some speed and, he's not going to be an easy guy to bring down. Ultimately, I think OU's in a really good spot with this running back room. you've kind of got a package with Bevel where I think you could kind of. I think Eichert and Lehman talked about this on their podcast, Oakland Breakdown. I think they talked about it where you're kind of going to have a package again with Bevel where you can bring back kind of that Belldozer package on maybe a 4th and 1 because he's just so big. He's a harder guy to bring down. What'd you think about the OU running back room?
I thought the OU running back room. I thought the run game was great. That game. One thing I will say is my uncle he called me. He said, "Hey man, somebody has to tell Gray he has to stop doing that juke move. He's got to stop doing the juke move." I think for Gray, what I want to see is just him hit the hole. I mean, I think that there were a couple of times where there was like 2 or 3 yards that he could have picked up, possibly got the first down. But, he was just dancing a little bit. I think, going back to Trey Sermon and Kennedy Brooks, what was really the biggest difference between those two? Trey Sermon's danced a little bit too much behind the line. He didn't hit the hole like Kennedy Brooks would. Kennedy Brooks was one cut, boom, I'm out there, right? So you want to see Gray improve over the year with that. Maybe not so many jukes and just kind of put his head down. Marcus Majors, I like Marcus Majors a lot. It's hard because you heard some rumblings within the fan base of some people saying, "Hey, maybe Marcus Majors needs to be the feature back, and then Gray can be that change of pace back." But I think that what Gray is trying to prove this year, and I think what he's going to do this year, is show that he's a every down back. And I'm kind of alluding to your point. But as far as what I saw from those two, I'm definitely encouraged. From the portion of the game that we got to see Jovante Barnes, you could tell it's obvious he is probably the most complete back on the team. But that's potential wise. He has a higher upside than probably everybody, and we haven't even seen Gavin Sawchuk, right? So with that being said, I'm pretty impressed thus far. Just want to see some of those things, tighten up some of the mechanics and just see those first downs and just see us be even more physical these next few games with Kent State and Nebraska. But definitely was happy with the running back room.
Yeah, and I feel like the running back room has a lot of depth this year. And if Levy
Mm-hmm.
really plays it right, you can play your freshmen's probably a significant amount of time this year, but still only play them 4 games and give them their red shirt. Because
With,
you have
with,
3 of them you can swap out.
mhm.
And
with how oh, I'm sorry to cut you off, bro. Go
no,
ahead.
you're good. No, you're good. I was just gonna say, with Sawchuk speed, some games, some teams you play, you're gonna need the speed. But with Jovante Barnes, some teams you're gonna need what Jovante Barnes brings in terms of a player that maybe he doesn't have the speed that Sawchuk has, but he's gonna be a harder guy to bring down, and he's gonna be a little bit more of a power runner. He's gonna be able to go in there
Yeah.
and knock a guy off of him, which is what we saw Gavin Freeman do. But Gavin Freeman's a
With
completely different story.
so with Levy's system, how Levy runs his variant of the system, uh, he definitely wants to use as many running backs as he can because he wants to get max production. So if you're talented at from because that was that's what's funny is that you're down to your third string running back and you're like, damn, this guy still has that go as well. So. I'm sure that we will see an awful lot of them. I'm sure we'll see some more packages as well. It's going to be interesting to see how this all shapes out because I think for this year especially, these first 5 weeks or so, I think that it's going to be key just for OU fans to be a bit patient to understand that this is a week to week building block for us until we get to Texas, right? Because Nebraska, then K State at home, and then we go on the road to TCU. And so all 3 teams, however you feel about them, they have somewhat improved this year. You get what I'm saying? So these are all going to be great tests for us going into the Red River game and then beyond. So definitely be patient because it's going to be a week to week thing, and you're going to see a lot of different stuff that you may love, that you may like, and that you may not like. So Yeah.
And this is the time to test it out when you're playing teams that you can just out talent, even with, your fourth or fifth running backs. You have to try different stuff out before you get into the more important games, and you necessarily can't. Because I think OU fans have got to remember there's, I think, 3 guys that you guys did not see: Todd Hudson, Jaden Knowles, Gavin Sawchuk, and Batavius Thompson. Okay, so 4 guys. There's 4 guys on the running back room that we did not see on Saturday that maybe we get to see next week. And again, we've heard a lot about great things about Sawchuk. And Jaden Knowles was here last year. And, Jaden Knowles maybe isn't the most dominant running back in this room, but he can still put up some production for you when you need it, when you need to give somebody else some rest. So, and Tawee Walker, we saw a little bit out of him, but I want to see more out of him because he does. He gives me a little bit of Ramondre Stevenson vibes as a guy that can just go in there and pound the ball when you need him to go pound it.
You don't think he's a poor man's P Ryan?
He could be a poor man's P Ryan too. He's big. Tawee Walker's big. He might be the biggest running back in that room. Like that's why I'm saying like and now that you say it, he kind of does give me some P Ryan vibes too. But Ramondre Stevenson being the most recent, he thinks of that guy. Like you get down the goal line, you need 4 or 5 yards. He's going to be that guy that you can just put in there, and he's going to be able to go get it for you.
Yeah.
So the last player I had on the offensive side of the ball that I was just super impressed with, and it's a player that necessarily we haven't paid, or at least I haven't paid a lot of attention to over the past couple of years, and it is Brayden Willis. That man was doing everything out there they needed him to. He was out there catching touchdown passes. He was out there blocking. Like he was just a disturbance for the defense, and he's kind of playing that role, and I know they talked about it on their podcast, but he's playing a role like Jeremiah Hall had, and that was kind of an area that I was very unsure about. Having Brayden Willis here, I'm like, well, I haven't really paid attention to this kid much since he's been at Oklahoma, so I don't know what he's about. Yes, on Saturday, he impressed me. I think he impressed a lot of people, especially with his blocking ability. What'd you think about Brayden Willis?
Man, it's more the same. I mean, he's been consistent this entire time, I believe. When he's healthy and when he's able to go, he's a difference maker. He and Jeremiah Hall, you saw them both do this last year, an awful lot. So it's nothing really new. It's just, hey, he's actually being featured this time. And I think that he has all those skills. I remember whenever when he committed to OU, I watched some of his film and I was like, this could be interesting. I was like, is he really going to play tight end, or what is he coming in as, But he was all over the field. He was doing everything. He was Mr. Everything for his team. But I don't think that he's a pleasant surprise. I think he's pleasantly consistent in doing exactly what he needs to do. I'm just ready to see some of the big explosive plays that they've said that he's been making throughout camp, and just see him kind of put some more stuff on film. I think that he's going to have a hell of a year this year. Daniel Parker didn't play that game, but I'm eager to see what he has as well. The entire tight end room, I'm excited to see all of them. I want to see Caden Helms. I want to see Lelevin. I want to see them all, because I think that they all could bring different variants to this offense that could be key for us at that position. So the way Brayden Willis was used in that game, kind of reminded you of kind of like the H-back. He was lined up in similar positions or whatnot, and some of his touchdowns came off of that, kind of just a little bit of deception, a little RPO, and he popped open. He got his touchdowns. And I mean, it just, like I said, it wasn't a pleasant surprise. It was pleasantly consistent. And that's what you want from a position like that, especially from an upperclassman, a senior, a leader on your team. You want somebody that day in and day out. I know this is what I'm going to get from him, and I can count on him to not only get touchdowns, but also block, especially in a way when you saw Freeman get his touchdown. I mean, it was pretty crazy. He blocked like 3 or 4 guys on that play, helping Freeman, kind of get that touchdown. So definitely happy with what I saw from Brayden Willis, and I just hope it continues for the rest of the year, and I hope he can show that not only is he going to be consistent, but he's also elevated his game as well.
Yeah. So, do you think he can potentially play that role that Jeremiah Hall played, and maybe even potentially play a little bit of fullback at all? Because I mean, that
My
tight end
whole
room
thing
is
about
pretty deep, so I think he could potentially do it.
my whole thing about with Brayden Willis, I think Brayden Willis is taller than Jeremiah Hall. He's more, I think, and honestly, I'm gonna be real with you, I think he's more athletic than Jeremiah Hall. Either that or he's more limber. So he's an athlete, and I think that he has been raw for quite some time. I don't think that he ever. I'm not sure if Lincoln. Well, I can't really say that because he battled a lot of injuries as well. So I think this year, barring any injuries, I think you'll see the best version of Brayden Willis, and I think you'll see that he can be used just like Jeremiah Hall. However, I think that he does have a future as a tight end at somewhere on some roster. Yeah.
Yeah, the when Jeremiah Hall got drafted, that was one of the biggest pieces that I thought OU lost to their team because Jeremiah Hall was just kind of consistent when he was here at Oklahoma. Like statistically, like he was a guy that I feel like you could rely on either in the running game or the passing game. And so um, I think Brayden Willis is going to be a perfect fit for the absence of Jeremiah Hall this year. So,
Yeah.
other than that, I now that I've slept on it, now I've thought about it, I'm pretty impressed with what OU was able to put out there in terms of just having a very vanilla scheme. I would still probably only give them a B plus because I really felt like they could have just been a little bit more explosive on offense outside of the first quarter. And I would really like to see, maybe not next week, but when we get to Nebraska, is can OU control the ball? Can they control the clock and maybe get their defense off the field a little bit longer so that they're not, potentially wearing out? Because when you start to play the Alabamas and the Ohio States of the world, you can't be having an 18 or 13-minute possession time. That'll just kill you, and that's how you get beat. So other than that, I thought Oklahoma played pretty well. I mean, we've talked about it in our group chat. The fans, in terms of energy, they really need to improve on that and bring that. I know Utah and Florida played in the evening, so that one's kind of a hard comparison to bring up. But the fans, they did show up at the beginning and they were there through the first quarter. The students, I don't think really have an excuse. They're younger. They can drink some water. They can stay
It's
out there. They
110
don't need to
degrees
drink the
out
beer
there,
till
man.
after.
It's 100 degrees out there, man. Give them a break. People were passing out. But no, I get what you're saying. No, it kind of seemed like it was dead for a sec, but at the same time, it's hard to compare that to the Florida game because the Florida and Utah game just it meant more at that point in time. I mean, it's game one. Everybody's juiced up about about Coach Napier. Anthony Richardson played out of his mind. That game was back and forth for the longest. At one point, I thought Utah was just like about to, blow the brakes off of them, but kept battling, and you got that upset victory. But at the same time, no, I think we'll be fine. Hopefully everything will be in line when as the season goes on. I'll definitely be there for the K-State game, so I'm hoping that everybody brings the noise there because I want to rattle the hell out of Adrian Martinez once again. Definitely see our boys be victorious. But no, I mean, all in all, PG, man, it was a great outing. Great to see the product on the field, although it was extremely vanilla. That's fine. We can add Oreos or whatever toppings you want to add to that ice cream cone. You can add it later. So at this point in time, I'm just happy with what I saw. I'm just happy football is back, man. Especially
Yeah,
OU football.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to have him back as well. This week has just been an incredible slate of games, even with Oregon getting blown out. It's just been an incredible slate of games. And, these, I know a lot of people are out there talking about it. I don't think the college football playoffs is going to devalue any of these games because they still have to be played and they're still going to matter at some level. But I think, talking about the fans in Oklahoma, I think when we get to the SEC, I think maybe ESPN and CBS and the SEC will potentially see that, hey, Oklahoma is a really hot place to play in September. And if we're going to give them 3 or 4 games in September, they need to be probably night games, or we just need to give them less games in September so that they're not out there dying. So, but ultimately, if the fans can just bring better energy as we get into Big 12 play, and by energy, I mean getting loud, being really involved, I think that will be just a huge improvement from them, and I think that potentially helps the team out going forward. So
I feel that. I agree.